Sometime in the next few days, a rocket is going to lift off from the southern tip of Texas that stands 124 meters tall, weighs over 5,000 metric tons fully loaded, and produces more thrust at liftoff than any machine human beings have ever built. It has 33 engines on the bottom stage alone. It burns liquid methane and liquid oxygen, and on this flight, for the first time in its entire development history, it is going to reach orbit, not a suborbital hop, not a partial trajectory that ends in a controlled splashdown in the Indian Ocean. Full orbital velocity, a complete trip around the Earth. And then, after spending potentially up to 48 hours circling the planet, the upper stage, a vehicle 52 meters tall and 9 meters wide, heavier than an empty Boeing 747, is going to fall back through the atmosphere, re-enter at thousands of miles per hour, flip itself upright using 4 massive steel flaps, reignite its engines and attempt to be caught midair by a pair of giant mechanical arms mounted on the launch tower it lifted off from. Nobody has ever done this before. No space agency, no private company, no nation on Earth. The upper stage of a rocket has never been caught out of the sky by a tower. And SpaceX is going to try it on the same flight where Starship reaches orbit for the first time in history while simultaneously deploying operational satellites into space. 3 things that have never been done before, all on the same flight, all at once. This is Starship Flight 14, and if it works, it is the single most significant moment in spaceflight since humans first landed on the moon. I am your name, and this is your channel. Subscribe right now, because what is about to happen will be talked about for decades. Let me take you through exactly how we got here, because the speed of this is something most people have not fully absorbed. 3 years ago, in April 2023, Starship attempted its first flight. It lasted 4 minutes. The vehicle tumbled out of control after multiple engines failed to ignite properly, and the range safety system destroyed it before it could reach the coast of Africa. The launch pad itself was heavily damaged. Chunks of concrete were thrown thousands of feet in every direction. It looked to many outside observers like a disaster. 3 years and 12 more flights later, SpaceX has a vehicle that survived a full re-entry from space, splashed down softly in the Indian Ocean, still in one piece, deployed 20 next-generation satellites, and communicated with every single one of them, reignited an engine in the vacuum of space, and is now floating intact in the ocean, waiting to be towed home for analysis. 13 flights in 3 years. From total destruction to an intact spacecraft floating calmly in the ocean after returning from space. That pace of development has no precedent in the history of rocketry. The space shuttle took years between major test flights. The Saturn V had only 2 uncrewed test flights before NASA put humans on top of it. SpaceX has iterated Starship 13 times in 39 months, each flight building directly on the data from the one before, each flight pushing further than the last. And now Flight 14 is the culmination of all of it. Let me explain what is actually going to happen on this flight, because the ambition is almost hard to believe when you lay it out step by step. The vehicle lifts off from Starbase in Boca Chica, Texas. All 33 Raptor 3 engines on the Super Heavy booster ignite simultaneously, producing approximately 17 million pounds of thrust. That is roughly twice the thrust of the Saturn V rocket that took astronauts to the moon. The stack accelerates upward through max Q, the moment of peak aerodynamic stress, at roughly 58 seconds into flight. At approximately 2 minutes and 18 seconds, most of the booster engines cut off. 3 seconds later, hot staging occurs. The upper stage, Starship itself, ignites its 6 Raptor engines while still attached to the booster and then separates. The booster flips around and begins its boost back burn, redirecting itself back toward the launch site. On previous flights, the booster has successfully been caught by the mechanical arms on the launch tower, a system SpaceX calls Mechazilla. The first time this worked was Flight 5 in October 2024, and the world watched a 70-meter-tall rocket booster descend on a column of flame and get plucked out of the air by 2 massive steel arms closing around it with centimeter-level precision. That was the booster. The booster catch is now a proven capability. Flight 14 will attempt the same thing with the upper stage, the ship. The 52-meter upper stage that will have just returned from orbit. After re-entering the atmosphere at hypersonic speed, after surviving temperatures that would melt steel, after flipping from a belly-first orientation to vertical using its 4 hinged flaps, after reigniting its engines and slowing to nearly 0 velocity directly above the launch tower, the ship will descend into the arms of Mechazilla and be caught. If it works, it means both halves of the largest rocket ever built can be launched, separated, flown independently through their respective mission profiles, and returned to the exact same launch site, ready to be inspected, stacked, and launched again. Full reusability, both stages, 1 launch tower. This is not a concept. This is not a PowerPoint presentation. This is a flight that is scheduled. The hardware exists. The vehicle is built. The booster and ship have both completed their cryogenic proof tests. The regulatory filings are in process. Elon Musk stated on August 4th during SpaceX's first public earnings call since the company's IPO that this is happening before the end of August, pending regulatory approval. But Flight 14 is not just about catching hardware. It is also about demonstrating that Starship is a real operational launch vehicle, not just a test article. For the first time, Starship will carry actual operational Starlink V3 satellites to orbit, not test payloads that burn up 20 minutes later. Real satellites deployed into real operational orbits where they will join the Starlink constellation and begin serving customers. Flight 13 on July 24th proved this was possible. It deployed 20 Starlink V3 satellites, communicated with all of them via radio frequency and laser links, and downloaded telemetry from each one. But those satellites were deliberately placed on a trajectory that caused them to re-enter and burn up within 20 minutes, a safety measure for a test flight that was not yet attempting full orbit. Flight 14 changes that. Real orbit, real satellites, real operational deployment. The payload capacity that makes this matter is staggering. Starship, in its current configuration, can carry over 100 metric tons to low Earth orbit. That is more than any rocket in history, more than the Saturn V, more than the Space Shuttle, more than any rocket currently flying by any nation on Earth. And Starship is designed to be fully reusable, which means that a 100-ton capacity does not come with a disposable rocket attached. The rocket comes back, both halves, ready to fly again. The cost implications of that are what make this more than just a spectacle. Right now, launching a kilogram of payload to orbit costs roughly several $1,000s on a Falcon 9. When Starship achieves full rapid reusability, which Musk stated on the August 4th call he sees no technical obstacles to achieving, the cost per kilogram drops by an order of magnitude or more. That kind of cost reduction does not just make current space activities cheaper. It makes entirely new categories of activity possible. Space stations that are 10 times larger than the ISS, manufacturing facilities in orbit, fuel depots that enable missions to Mars and beyond, telescopes too large to fit on any existing rocket, fully assembled habitats launched in a single piece. Infrastructure that currently exists only in science fiction becomes physically achievable when you can put 100 tons in orbit for a fraction of what it costs today and do it every single day. And that daily flight rate is not a distant fantasy anymore either. Musk stated explicitly on the earnings call that he expects SpaceX to be conducting at least one Starship flight per day within approximately 1 year. One flight per day, 100 tons per flight, 36,500 metric tons delivered to orbit per year from a single launch site. For comparison, the total mass of the International Space Station, built over 13 years using dozens of launches from multiple countries, is approximately 420 metric tons. At one Starship flight per day, SpaceX could deliver the equivalent mass of 86 International Space Stations to orbit in a single year. Now, there is a reason this matters beyond commercial satellite deployment, beyond cost savings, beyond the engineering achievement itself. Starship is the vehicle NASA selected for the human landing system under the Artemis program. When astronauts return to the surface of the moon on Artemis III, they will descend from lunar orbit to the surface inside a Starship. The same vehicle being tested right now, the same vehicle that just survived re-entry intact for the first time on Flight 13, the same vehicle that is about to reach orbit for the first time on Flight 14. Every flight test SpaceX conducts is simultaneously a test of the vehicle that will carry humans back to the lunar surface. And beyond the moon, Starship is the vehicle SpaceX has designed from the beginning to eventually carry humans to Mars. In May of 2026, SpaceX announced the first private crewed interplanetary mission, a 2-year flyby of Mars and return to Earth, commanded by Chun Wang aboard a Starship. That mission has no confirmed launch date yet, but the vehicle it will fly on is the same one about to attempt orbital flight for the first time. Everything builds on everything else. Flight 13 proved the heat shield works. Flight 14 proves orbit works. Future flights prove refueling, prove the ship catch, prove long-duration operations. And at some point in that progression, the vehicle crosses the line from test article to operational spacecraft capable of carrying humans beyond Earth. The heat shield specifically deserves a moment of attention because it was the single biggest unsolved problem in Starship's development for years. The vehicle re-enters the atmosphere at speeds exceeding 25,000 kilometers per hour. At those velocities, the compressed air in front of the vehicle heats to temperatures that would destroy any unprotected metal surface within seconds. Starship uses thousands of individual hexagonal ceramic tiles bonded to its windward side to survive this heating. For several flights, those tiles were the weak point. Tiles came loose, hot plasma penetrated gaps, hardware was damaged or destroyed on re-entry. Flight after flight, SpaceX refined the tile attachment, the gap sealing, the material composition. On Flight 13, for the first time ever, the ship survived re-entry completely intact and splashed down gently enough to remain floating in the ocean. SpaceX sent recovery vessels to tow it back for inspection. And based on what they saw, Musk said on the August 4th call that he would consider the heat shield problem solved. That statement is not a guarantee. Engineering rarely offers guarantees, but it represents a level of confidence that did not exist 3 months ago, 6 months ago, a year ago. And it is that confidence that allowed SpaceX to schedule the orbital attempt and the ship catch attempt on the same flight. They would not be attempting both simultaneously if they were not highly confident in the thermal protection system's ability to bring the ship back intact from a full orbital reentry. So here is where things stand right now in August 2026. Starship has flown 13 times. It has gone from total failure to intact recovery in 3 years. Its heat shield is working, its satellite deployment is proven, its booster catch is proven, its in-space engine relight is demonstrated, and within days it is going to attempt 3 things at once that have never been done by any vehicle in the history of human spaceflight. First, orbit. First operational satellite deployment from orbit, first upper stage tower catch, 1 flight, 3 firsts, and if it works, the era of fully reusable super heavy lift spaceflight begins. Not in theory, not in a plan, in hardware. Flying, landing, flying again. If that matters to you, and it should, subscribe right now and turn on notifications, because when Flight 14 happens, you will want to already understand what you're watching. Drop a comment telling me whether you think the ship catch will work on the first try, and share this with someone who still thinks Starship is just a test rocket, because after this flight, that word stops applying. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next one.